everyone, and welcome to episode 14 of the Detours in Music podcast. Right now, at least if you're listening to this when it's being first uploaded, we're at the very start of the kind of shutdown in America from the coronavirus. So this is the first episode that will be recorded via Skype or other webcam platform. So there's a little bit of audio issues. I guess bear with me and all other podcasters and creators in this time. But I am very grateful to Dr. Connell for working with me in scheduling this episode over Skype and to all future episodes that will be over a webcam platform. Hope you enjoy this one.
Okay, I'm Andy Connell. I'm a clarinetist and saxophonist. I teach at James Madison University, and I'm the ethnomusicologist on the faculty. So
Great.
That's a very simple introduction. So, yeah.
Can you tell us about your start in music?
Well, I started when I had sort of a halting start because I actually started when I was about, I think around 9 or 10, like fourth grade, and I studied clarinet for like 2 months. Then I quit.
Okay.
I was just too young. And then when I went to junior high, you had the first time you had electives. You know, I always think this is one of the great accidents in my life, in that one of the what everybody wanted to take was shop. Mm-hmm. It was sort of you did like machine building and metal work and stuff like that, and I think since everybody wanted to take shop, and I'd also put down that I'd played clarinet and studied it. And so I have a feeling that the band director, this guy named Mr. Moreno, the junior high band director, he probably put in something in there for the people who are doing the schedules that if you find anybody who plays an instrument, just put them in band.
Yeah.
So it was like my second choice. And so I often wonder, you have that question, what would you be doing if you weren't doing this? I often wonder what happened if I'd gotten shop instead of band.
Yeah. Would you have come to it on your own again, or? Yeah.
I have no idea, I'm certainly glad that I got banned. Mm-hmm. So I started like everybody else. I started in school, beginning band, and luckily that band director, Moreno, was a great teacher. Mm-hmm. He was a violinist in the local symphony, and but was a very funny guy. He had lots of jokes that I still kind of remember to this day. If somebody was screwing up, which was pretty much all of us at that point. Mm-hmm. He would suggest that we take up underwater basket weaving was his standard joke, which I always thought of as, basically somebody in scuba gear at the bottom of a pool weaving a basket. It wasn't until later that my mother-in-law actually made baskets and said, well, that's what you do. You soak them in water so you can bend it and make the basket. Yeah. But for me, I for years had this picture of the underwater basket weaving.
And then from middle school band, I guess going into high school, were you passionate about music making, or more it was where your friends were at that point?
I always enjoyed it. I think I was pretty good at it. I was not super talented in any special way that I can remember, but I liked band. I was the band geek, and then I played in orchestra. I didn't play any jazz till really the very end of high school. Mm-hmm. Like rising, I was just kind of playing in band and orchestra and doing that sort of thing. So, and I had a pretty good band director in high school as well. He basically made it fun. Both of them were great because it was a lot of fun making music, and so I credit them with just doing that. Then when I got out of high school, I actually, I tried working I always like to say I tried working for a living, and it just didn't agree with me. So,
yeah.
And I took, you talk about in your kind of guidelines detours, and it seems like my life has all been detours, and which says in some ways life, there aren't really detours, it's just crooked. It's not a straight line. Mm-hmm. I think that you and a lot of the students at JMU are much more together than I was at your age. Mm-hmm. I was just I felt like I was just sort of wandering through life, doing college, and that's when I started actually playing jazz when I was in college as far as jazz band, as well as doing band and orchestra and all chamber music. And I basically went to junior college for a couple of years, and then I dropped out. for like, I'm trying to think how long almost a decade it seemed like.
Oh.
You know, I actually went to two different junior colleges because I went to another one in Santa Cruz in Northern California, mainly because they had this great jazz instructor, this trumpet player named Ray Brown, who played with Stan Kenton and others, and is one of those great teachers in my life. I can count on one hand. But the same time, I was just sort of starting to play, and then I just did this thing where I just dropped out for a while and just played music and taught and did different things. I also studied clarinet with a great clarinet teacher named Rosario Mazzeo, who played in the Boston Symphony for 30 years and had retired, was living in Carmel, and he was the one who really introduced me to serious music making.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the best teacher I've ever had of any subject, just gifted teacher, and he had students from all over the world coming to study with him. I mean, as an example, I would have my lesson, and then I'd go out in his, you always come in through the kitchen. He had this big house in Carmel, and waiting there would be Dave Breeden, who was the principal clarinetist with San Francisco Symphony at the time.
Wow.
So he's following me. It was a super nice guy. Unfortunately, he died a number of years ago, too young. But he was a wonderful musician and a great guy. But it was a little bit intimidating, though, that principal clarinet at San Francisco Symphony is listening to your lesson.
But that's pretty cool that he, I guess, gave lessons to such a level of people.
Oh yeah, well, he was a master teacher. He was an amazing teacher. So some of his players are just amazing, and everybody's doing different things. That was the thing, is he had a way of teaching where nobody came out sounding the same. He didn't like groom them ever to do like orchestra auditions or do that sort of thing. He somehow had a way of sort of cultivating your own style. I mean, you studied the standard literature and everything like that, but people went in different directions. There was a lot of very interesting students he had. Years, so.
What was your transition into attending school for music?
That was, I started out, when I first went to college, I was like a lot of people. I had no major. I just was sort of, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. But then I just sort of fell into music. That was naturally where I gravitated to. That's what I enjoyed the most. Oh, that's when I started I basically, I guess after about a year of college, that's when I really decided I was going to be a music major.
Okay.
And it was a little bit different back then. I mean, schools I went to, especially the junior college where I started, there was no audition for a music major. You just sort of said you were.
Okay.
So, I mean, what we have at JMU is much more structured in some ways, much more organized than I first started in college. And I think, in general, I think that a lot of universities there's a much more of a structure now than there was.
Yeah.
We're talking back in the 1970s, back when dinosaurs still roamed the earth. So, yeah, and when in that period where I was out of school, I basically just freelanced. I taught private lessons. I had a studio of like 20 students or so. I played in a couple different orchestras. I played in rock bands and jazz groups. I did arrangements for people. I mean, like as you do when you're kind of a freelance musician, you're a jack of all trades. You fit in wherever you can. And it was really fun. I mean, I had a good time, and I supported myself, in the way musicians support themselves, which is, living in a really funky place.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, I just sort of felt like, I needed more of an intellectual challenge. I could sort of see myself freelancing, and that was fun, but it was also feeling like I was just sort of, bicycling in place, walking in place. I wasn't really going anywhere. It was not like I was super ambitious, but it certainly felt like I wanted something to challenge me more. And I was living in a small town, Santa Cruz, which was a cool place to live, and I was doing playing. I was doing playing with musicians in the Bay Area, but it was sort of like, I wasn't really going to get anywhere. I wasn't going to do, and plus I think I had that influence. My father, who basically did what he wanted to do, as a biology professor, he liked that life, and he certainly seemed happy and was, getting to do a lot of travel. And most of his research was in Australia, in the Great Barrier Reef and the rainforest. So we actually lived in Australia a couple times for a year and a half when I was in elementary school, and then a year in high school, and so that was certainly part of the influence on me going back. So I basically went back to school to basically finish my undergraduate, because I had all these millions of junior college credits, of which only 79 were transferable. So I sort of went in as a junior. So I had spent 2 more years getting my undergraduate degree, and then from then I had kind of decided I wanted to do ethnomusicology. I was interested in that, so I went to the university. I went back first to San Jose State in Northern California to finish my undergraduate there. And the clarinet teacher I studied with there, Janet Averett, had been a doctoral student of Fred Ormond at the University of Michigan.
Okay.
So when I applied for graduate schools, I applied for a number, but that was the one I really wanted to go to. I wanted to study with Fred. And I also had this on my mind that I'd already been interested in Brazilian music. I've been playing with Brazilian musicians in the Bay Area. I traveled to Brazil already. So this idea of studying that music in an academic sense was also kind of in the back of my mind when I auditioned for Michigan and went there. So I spent 2.5 years there, and then actually did 2 masters. I did one in woodwind performance, so I was studying clarinet, but also studying Don Sinda, the saxophone professor, and studying flute and bassoon. The woodwind major there, I did my main recital on clarinet, but I did juries on all the other instruments.
Okay.
And then I also did a second master's in ethnomusicology.
Okay.
It's kind of possible to do there because the graduate degrees at Michigan, there's not a lot of academic classes you have to take.
Yeah.
So I could literally do the 2 masters in basically 2 years. I mean, it took me 5 semesters. You could actually do a master's in 1 year there if you decide you didn't want to have any life outside of that. So I did the 2 there, and then went on to UCLA for my doctoral work in ethnomusicology.
Do you think that your interest in ethnomusicology kind of came from when you were freelancing and just meeting other musicians?
Yeah, a lot of it. I played a lot of world music. With the Brazilian musicians, got introduced to that. I'd been in another band that did like African music, so-called world beat, as it was called back then. So I was certainly listening to a lot of music from around the world, was interested in that. Also playing classical chamber music in orchestras. I did a lot more classical playing back then than I do now. But that's just sort of drew my interest, kind of wanting to look at things that way.
Cool. Do you think that your time when you were freelancing kind of gave you the perspective now as, like, I guess, what you would be doing maybe if you weren't a musician? Like, for you, your dabbling was still in the music field, and that's kind of what brought you to music? Is that what you would say?
Yeah, as I said, I think I've always wanted to do what I wanted. I did have some like regular jobs, but they weren't particularly good jobs. Those are the sort of jobs you do when you're young. But there was nothing I was passionate about. But music was something I really liked, that I thought about all the time, that I listened to all the time, that hung out with musicians all the time. We talked about music all the time. You know how it is. You have that obsession. You have to. To be a musician, you have to be certainly somewhat obsessed. It's a healthy obsession. Otherwise, there's not really a reason to do it. So it was kind of, in a way, kind of searching for ways that I could kind of play music, be in music, study it, be intellectually stimulated, have fun, which is the most important thing. If there's any reason to do music because it's fun, should be your first answer. Living at it should be maybe second. So I guess it's just a pursuit of fun, really. Playing music, which is, and playing with other people in some way.
Yeah. Have you ever been persuaded to change career paths in your professional life?
I mean, certainly going back to school
Mm-hmm.
was a change in career path. I mean, but I wasn't persuaded to do. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Maybe circumstances persuaded me that I should change something.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly it was something I did.
Mm-hmm.
And it was certainly a big disruption in my life to go back to graduate school, especially to move out, with my family, moving with me. For them it was certainly hard.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of going back to graduate school, I was moving to Michigan. The hard thing with being a freelance musician is you develop all these contacts. People, musicians you meet, you play with, you establish a kind of a network. You go someplace new, it takes a while to reestablish a new network. So graduate school kind of disrupted that for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was harder. And plus you're so busy studying, I wasn't really looking for a lot of gigs. I was doing some gigging, but certainly that kind of going from this life where I was gigging almost every week, and teaching, to going one where I was only doing it occasionally. So, which has sort of continued today, where I play, but not necessarily on a regular basis. But again, I made that choice, and I've, like any choice, you own it.
Mm-hmm.
There are no bad choices. It's just what you do with it, which is important.
I guess when you went to your undergrad degree, I guess sort of as a junior, what's something that you struggled with the transition to, I guess, all music classes, maybe?
I'm not sure if I could say that I struggled. There were always things that were hard, things I didn't do it well that I had to learn more about. I think when I went back, I had a different perspective.
Yeah.
When I was first in college, in a sense, I would get bugged by a lot of the stuff that you had to do. You don't get to take all music classes, right? You're doing the gen ed, you're doing this. The whole idea of liberal education is this rounded education, and
yeah.
I would say complain or resist that to some ways. And when I went back, I was a bit older. I was actually older than my clarinet professor in grad school. I was older than my advisor in my doctoral program, my dissertation advisor. So it's a little bit of a different perspective there.
Yeah.
But where was I going with this train of thought? When I went back, I sort of had a better perspective. I understood that all the other stuff were just hoops.
Yeah.
You jump those hoops. At the end, they give you a degree, and then you can kind of make your own choices from there. I was talking with Sharunas about this recently, and he was saying that he feels like he's having a lot more fun making music now. He doesn't have a teacher.
Yeah.
On his own. It's not that you can't benefit. We're all learning all the time, and I enjoyed taking lessons, and I really enjoyed being in school.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly once you get out, then you make those choices, and it's also the challenge once you get out, because you don't have that school structure.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you keep playing music? Because you have to seek out those connections. You have to make yourself practice on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always a challenge for a lot of people getting out of music school, and that's why, I think, even in the conservatory, I think I saw some statistic of the Manhattan School of Music, and only 5% of the graduates actually make their living as musicians, which doesn't mean they're not playing music, right? You can play music at any level, any kind of way, and as long as you're having fun, then that's value, right there. They're always challenged. I think maybe the challenge for me was that just sort of that change of lifestyle a little bit, of going, having school at the forefront rather than sort of gigs at the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
But that was something that it didn't really bother me that much, because I was enjoying school too.
Mm-hmm.
As a graduate student, A, I had no power,
Mm-hmm.
and B, that you just don't want to get involved in any of the drama of your professors.
Mm-hmm.
There are always some professors, not so much, I don't so much at our university, but other universities,
Mm-hmm.
try to draw their students into their drama, and it's like, students only lose when that happens. So that's what my advice when you go to grad school is like, just do your thing.
Yeah.
If you've got a professor who's like going off somewhere else, just smile and watch them do it and don't get involved.
That's good advice.
Yeah. In my doctoral program at UCLA, it was a big faculty. It's the biggest ethno department. And there were people who didn't get along.
Mm-hmm.
And were in almost outright wars against each other. And I saw other friends get dragged into those wars and take sides. And
yeah.
And by that point, I'd kind of learned, that's, having a PhD does not guarantee maturity. So,
yeah. That's true.
So that was basically, at that point, but I really learned from that, making that mistake.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, what's some advice you would have for younger musicians who maybe are in similar situations as you were? They're not exactly sure if they're ready for college, or they're just struggling in maybe music history. Maybe they don't like music history.
Right. The thing to do if you're in college, you're taking these classes, there are certain requirements
mm-hmm.
of classes. And they're not hard.
Mm-hmm.
All of us, we don't intentionally make the classes hard. We want you to learn. We want you to work.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as you keep up and don't get behind,
mm-hmm.
it won't be that hard. It's also, you're going to find that not every class is going to be exactly what you expect it to be. Not every professor is going to be perfect. We're just human beings like anybody else.
Yep.
I personally think I'm a pretty good teacher, but I'm not maybe the best teacher for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
As a student, I had this experience with teachers I thought were fantastic, that I loved going to their classes, and there'd be some of them in class who would just complain about it.
Yep.
Hate teaching. So that's sort of my, this person is great, but the other, maybe you're just not the perfect teacher for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has different ways of learning, and they need different things.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing to do is, if you just go to class and you keep up with the work, you'll get through it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're always going to like certain classes more than others, certain professors more than others. And that's okay, because when you get out in life, that's going to happen in spades.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just sit there and complain or don't show up, well, nobody's going to hire you.
Yep.
So you have to sort of just, sometimes just put your head down and do the work, and part of an education is this kind of well-rounded. So you learn a lot of stuff because you really don't know what you're going to use later, what information. And you may find some of those other classes may be totally fascinating. I remember in my undergraduate, one of the greatest classes I had was this comparative religions class. It was like a gen ed class,
mm-hmm.
but it had a great teacher, and it was a really fun class to go to, which I never would have thought from the outset. It was just a class I had to take because it was required,
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully, you've hopefully had some experiences like that too, And so I guess that's,
Yeah, not everything has to be your favorite.
No, so just quit your whining and do the work. Buck it up.
Yes.
But also, if you're not clear on stuff, if you get behind, go talk to your professors, get to know them a little bit, don't hesitate to ask for help. If you're free, but, especially if you don't like it, if you stop going to class, well, then you're going to enjoy it even less because you're not keeping up.
Yeah.
So.
I guess going back to your life,
Mm-hmm.
What are some musical detours you think you've been on?
Well, it all kind of boils down to what I got interested in, you're playing and you're kind of finding music that you enjoy. And so a big detour was going into Brazilian music, which something never imagined. And that sort of starts a little bit in kind of in my early 20s, just hearing bossa nova and kind of learning jazz, where Brazilian music is part of the jazz repertoire now. And so being interested there kind of with friends, but it really happens when I moved to the Bay Area, and I started playing with Brazilian musicians who really introduced me to the really great stuff, stuff I didn't know. So that was certainly a detour that became a complete obsession.
Yeah.
You know, that took me kind of back into school and through graduate school, was that obsession with Brazilian music. So that was certainly a detour. I mean, the way I went through school, taking a break in the middle, I don't recommend for anybody to do that, but what I did. So, and I think, you know, I have gained a certain amount of experience like that from that I wouldn't have otherwise. But if I was to go back to it now, I would say, you know, I would have preferred to go straight through school, you know, and then establish a career. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, because it's hard to tell. Like,
I think I do more.
What changed?
Yeah, because I do more playing still than most like musicologists and ethnomusicologists. I mean, it's not that it's unheard of. There are a lot of musicologists who are really great players. But the majority of them, it's kind of, that takes so much energy, you basically stop practicing and doing so. Again, I don't practice enough anymore, but yeah, at one point I did do a lot of practicing. So, you know.
Is Brazilian music, I know that you play a lot of it, but is that also your field of study, I guess?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I when I was in grad school at Michigan, I did a master's thesis on choro, which is, you know, it was an experimental document for me. I would not want to show that to anybody now, but you know, I produced what I could at the time. And then for my dissertation, of course, I lived in Brazil for almost a year.
Okay.
In Rio, and studied music there, and played a lot, and did interviews and research there. So that was a bit more serious. What led me in my research was always the music that I liked, the music I was trying to play, the music I enjoyed listening to. So that, and I wanted to learn more about, you know, so that has always guided me. What do I like doing? What do I like playing? You know, I like the Stravinsky one. Too many pieces of music finish long after the end. You know, saying what you want to say and then getting out. You know. Certainly, you know, when we talk with like the jazz students, you know, it's often a sort of thing like they end their solo and then they keep playing. It's like, okay, just stop.
Yeah.
You know, but I think ultimately it's kind of, music has to be something that's your passion, your obsession. If you really are obsessed, then you're going to find a way to do it in some way. Whether it's your profession or not, you know, it's not even as important, you know. Some of the best musicians I've ever played with didn't make their living as musicians, so, you know, for whatever reason, you know, so, you know, there's certainly stuff if you're making a living. I mean, I feel for my musician friends now the ones who only make their living primarily from gigging, because they're all suffering. I've several of them on Facebook are doing like Kickstarter campaigns, or they're looking for, you know, subscription they're doing concerts in their home. I don't know if you've seen some of those.
Yeah.
A lot of musicians are doing that, you know, partly just to play and perform, but also, you know, for these ones have no gigs. I mean, they don't know how they're going to pay their rent next month. So it's really tough right now. You know? I feel lucky having a job. I mean, I remember I put an announcement on Facebook when JMU, you know, canceled all the in-person classes, and one of my friends, a musician, "Are you going to get paid, Andy?" And I said, "Don't worry, Gigi. It's not like a real job. We get paid whether it's up or not."
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm certainly fortunate to have that. But for a lot of people, not just musicians, obviously, you know, people being, you know, clerks, or, you know, have a job where you have to go to it, you know.
In closing, I was going to ask, what brought you to your job at JMU?
There was an advertisement for it, you know, and I applied. So that was basically it. I mean, one of a fellow UCLA grad.
Okay.
Had the job before me here.
Okay.
He's another saxophone player. Had like a free improv group together when I was at UCLA. And, you know, so he kind of let me know, we talked a bit about the job. So when he basically quit he got a job. He teaches now at UC San Diego, but he got a job like in June. So they were desperate. They did a search, and I applied for it. And it just so happened because we do very similar things. I was just sort of a fit for this job, which is the whole thing with an academic job is, are you a fit or not? Do your skills fit what they're looking for? And I just happened to be this sort of thing where I could teach world music, I could teach jazz, I could do American music, I just sort of fit the job. So they actually did a phone interview with me in like July, I think, of 2002, I guess. Yeah. Called me back 10 minutes later to offer me the job. So
that's nice.
that was pretty nice. Then I had a 1-year position, so then I had to apply again. I had to go through a more extensive process before they hired me. So, but yeah, I was coming here as a place. I think I'd heard of JMU because they'd been like in March Madness back in the early 90s. They had this famous basketball coach for a while, and so that was the only thing I knew about them. I knew my friend taught there, so it was a bit of shock to sort of, graduate in June, have this interview in July.
Yeah.
Right. And then 3 weeks later, I'm living in Harrisonburg. So it was like,
but thank you for meeting over Skype. I know this was confusing, but
well, it's an extraordinary time, nothing like any of us have experienced. So we're all kind of in the same boat, just figuring it out. So, all right, great.
Thank you all for listening to this episode of the podcast, and we have a bunch coming up now that everyone's schedules have sort of settled down with the new online platforms of meeting. As always, listen to our episodes on the YouTube channel, on Spotify, Apple Music podcast apps, and feel free to connect with me and the podcast on our Instagram at Detours and Music Podcast. See you next time.